you're interested in expanding your universe, each one of them will have something that's interesting and new.
It all takes place in the space of less than an hour.
The questions were very knowledge-based. Take the work hat off, look at something cool, and think about things in a different way.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, Luca. Thanks for taking the time to do this presentation. Can you tell us just a little bit about the talk today before we kick off?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about climate change and the oil and gas industry. And we're going to focus on where we are with climate change, how did we get there, and what is that we are doing at the moment to try to tackle that problem, but also what more needs to be done. And ending up with what is the role of the oil and gas industry itself in tackling the challenge of climate change. What can we do as an industry? And what does it mean for COP26, the conference of the party that has been now postponed to next year, but was planning for November? And how can we bring that proposition there?
Okay, super. Well, Luca, without further ado, let's dive into your presentation, and your 20 minutes starts now.
Thank you very much, Steven. So, I don't know if you have seen this one. This was the cover of The Economist last year at some point, and these are called warming stripes. Each stripe represents 1 year from the 1800 to nowadays, and the color means how cooler or warmer than the average, the temperature, the global average temperature was on that particular year. And as you can see, the last 40 years have been quite warm and getting warmer. And so where did this start? Let's take a step back and start from the UK and the Industrial Revolution. And you can see on the map on the top left, the dots appearing. That's industrial activity. And that industrial activity actually producing CO2. So those are elements of CO2. And these are straight related to the progress, if you want, of the human condition. And you can see on the bottom left graph, the correlation between life expectancy and income. The yellow dot there, Europe, and especially the United Kingdom, which is already in an advanced position, and green then is the United States or America that you see moving towards the right as the emission grows, as you can see there, and start going bigger in the UK and expanding to the rest of Europe and soon to the rest of the globe as well, starting from the United States. And that's a tale of forward world, because if you look at the right, that's the human condition progressing. But we're still in a situation where, even though we'd like to think in terms of developed country and developed country, we can probably identify at least 4 different categories here. And the population underneath there is the 7 billion people we are now, exactly 7.7, but are each person, each small icon there represents 1 billion people. And so the condition we are used to, the standard of living that we are used to on the right, as actually a minority of the rest of the population, which is striving to get to that level. So when we think about energy and climate change, we need to think about how do we move all those people, those the remaining 6 billion, to a standard of living that we find comfortable and reasonable now, without that impact on the environment, without those emissions that are represented by the orange dot. And you can see that in the meantime, the bigger red dots of China and India caught up with Europe and the US. And so standard of living are increasing in most parts of the world, but so are the terrible spikes that you can see on the top left, which is the carbon emission. So how bad is the situation now? It is quite bad. Again, on the top left, you can see the historical and the projection. At the moment, we are heading towards a 2.8, 3.2 degrees, or 3 degrees centigrade increase compared to pre-industrial level. The gray area is if we don't do nothing, but we're not doing nothing. We are doing something. The problem is, are we doing enough? And the answer is no, because even if we stick to the pledges made at the COP26 in Paris, we are still going towards the 2.5 and 2.8, which is too much. And actually, we need to stay 2 degrees to respect the Paris Agreement, but actually, we need to hit 1.5, as the report from the IPCC told us in 2018. And why 1.5 is so much more important compared to 2. You can see on the bottom, each of the bar there represent an important element of ecosystem of the planet. And the gray bar is where we are now. So we already increased by 1 degree the average temperature. And so we can see already start seeing an impact on the ecosystem, coastal flooding, reduction of the Arctic ice, and impact on corals and a number of other atmospheric events that are related to climate change. The two red lines there, you can see the top one, the 2 degrees, is bringing every bar into the red or dark orange gray area, which means higher risk. And so 1.5 is not ideal, but it keeps most of those part of the ecosystem in the orange zone, which is better. Now, the problem with the emission of CO2, they have the nasty habit of staying in the atmosphere, in practical terms, forever. So even if with the current COVID-19 crisis, we see air pollution decreasing in some of the cities, that's not having an impact on greenhouse gases because they stay there and they're still having an impact. So what we see on the top right is the mitigation curve to hit the carbon budget. So the concept of carbon budget is how much carbon can we still produce and put into the atmosphere before we go beyond the threshold of the 2 degrees. And so you can see there that we need to start immediately a reduction of 6% year on year to be able to do so. And if you wait for 10 years, that will be 10 years. But that's not enough because this is a 2 degrees. So if you look at the 1 degrees, the massive monumental reduction we need to start doing right now is practically impossible. So we're gonna overshoot the budget, which means that not only we have to do all the action to reduce the emissions right now, but we also start thinking and acting on taking CO2 directly out of the atmosphere. And we'll come back to this point later. So why we are in this bad situation, who to blame? It's so nice to find someone else to blame. And actually, most of the media find an easy target here. This is a representation of the top 20 companies that contributed to the 35% of the emissions since 1965. And the paper even put the names and the picture of the CEOs, which is an easy target, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that those are commodities, oil and gas and coal and the fossil fuel, which definitely are responsible for the increase in greenhouse gases and for the heat in the atmosphere. But on the left, you see the sources, and on the right, you see the services that we benefit from to take our standard of living towards the right-hand side of that graph that I showed before. And in the middle is the combination and the kind of interaction. So we need to look at the supply on the left, and we need to look at the demand on the right. And we're going to do it right now. So on demand, if you look at the UK, you can see that energy benefited for a massive reduction power, right? So power, energy, reduction of emissions since the 90s. But the other sector, not so much. And so that's where a lot of the action is to be focused on. And we're going to go quickly through some of these sectors now. So starting from power. As I said, power on the left here, the side of the slide, already reduced big time, and it's going to do even more. So the CCC, the Committee on Climate Change, is forecasting that we're going to need to double the amount of electricity in the system by 2050. And most of that will come from renewable, the red part of the histogram, and mainly from offshore wind, which is a nice situation to be in for the UK because there's a lot of wind resources available. And the sector deal that was signed last year, the offshore wind sector deal is planning to take us to 75 plus gigawatt per year by 2050 compared to the 10, 12 we have now. Another sector which is hard to decarbonize is manufacturing. And actually, we have reduced the amount of CO2 in the UK in the past 40 years by 40%. That's the official number, but a lot of that happened by moving production abroad and then importing back the product. And that's, from a planet perspective, doesn't make any sense or doesn't make any difference because the atmosphere doesn't really know those borders. But the good thing is that the plan of the CCC and the government direction is not to do so. So we need to decarbonize the industry while keeping the industry in the country. And some of them are particularly difficult, like cement, steel, because they require and produce CO2, and they require coal, for example, in the process, not only for electricity. So the answer there seems to be going towards hydrogen when it's possible and capturing the emissions from the chimney of the plant, and therefore carbon capture and storage that we mentioned before. You can see there the key industrial clusters in the UK where most of the industrial production is concentrated, and therefore there is opportunity to do something at cluster level and have a big impact on all of these production and materials. And that includes cement, steel, and also all the petrochemical product that, for which oil and gas is also a feedstock, an important feedstock. And we see a lot of that need in these days for protective equipment for NHS and beyond. Then other sector, transport. Transport is, there's a big increase finally in the sales of electric cars. So automotive seems to be going electric, although it will probably be a combination of electric and hydrogen. Electric has the convenience, you can charge pretty much anywhere, but it takes a long time. Hydrogen is faster, but the infrastructure for charging is practically non-existent at the moment. But it's likely to be electric vehicle for most of the transport we need, and hydrogen for the return to base type of fleet, or for the long transport or the long haul requirement. Aviation is a particularly difficult sector to decarbonize, and therefore, the energy density of fossil fuel is still an advantage because it needs to be light, and you can't put heavy batteries on airplanes. But there are experimentation going on with hydrogen aircraft and battery-powered aircraft, mainly for small flights between hopping between the islands. In Scotland, for example, there's a project and a test going on the Orkney Island. And they're also looking at a solution from the circular economy perspective, like recycle, creating jet fuel from waste, from domestic waste. And there's a plant being built by Shell in partnership with British Airways near Heathrow. And finally, on the transport, there's a marine, which is a big polluter in a way, and they're looking at hydrogen, biofuels, and ammonia, all sorts of less polluting fuel for that. The UK, of course, like many other countries in the northern hemisphere, is quite cold, especially here in Scotland. And domestic heat is actually one of the big sources of CO2 emission. And the recommendation from the CCC in the direction that the sector is taking is a combination of looking at heat pumps, so electrifying heating when possible, or converting the network to hydrogen. And pretty much every gas network company have a program and experiment in for looking at the suitability and the repurposing their gas network to transport hydrogen, which can be done without the need to change appliances up to 20%, but of course then with some modification when we bring it to 100%. But that would be a massive reduction in CO2, of course. And finally, the construction is another sector where it is looking at how to decarbonize both the production of cement, but also using materials that can be used from carbon, so carbon negative materials, going back to that element of taking CO2 out of the atmosphere more than we put it back in. And also looking at the new philosophy of designing for reuse as opposed to destroy at the end of the life, so that less CO2 is emitting the atmosphere. So that's the demand side. And how are we doing with the technology? Well, the technology is not really there yet. You can see on the top left a chart from the International Energy Agency, which is looking at the progress of the various technology required for that net zero future. And you can see a lot of yellow and red dots with a few green. So technology innovation is crucially important, and this is what we're trying to do here at the GTC as well. And actually, there are some innovation there that seems to be promising, although they're in very early stages. I put some of them here on the slide, and I apologize for many others that are not, but this is just an example. But there are some potential game changers being developed from taking hydrogen straight from depleted oil and gas reservoir, leaving everything else in the ground, so kind of a downhole refinery, if you want, to transporting hydrogen at temperature, normal temperature and pressure, which is the big problem of using hydrogen as a commodity at the moment. And also experiment in taking, in that circular economy concept of taking the CO2 from the atmosphere to create new fuel that can be used in a sort of very low carbon net result. And finally, on the bottom right, direct air capture. So it's not only capturing carbon from emissions, but it's also capturing carbon straight from the air to inject or to store it somewhere, or to produce something that we track it for a long time. And that's how we want to compensate that the budget, the carbon budget overshooting that I talked about before. So that's the demand side. What's going on the supply side? So I took some screenshot from the oil and gas companies in February. So that was before COVID, of course. Now everything is about how to deal with that, Leon. But taking a snapshot of what was the situation. Interesting on the graph on the left, which is again from the International Energy Agency, is showing the contribution in Scope 1 and Scope 3 emission by the various segments of the oil and gas industry. And Scope 1 is, of course, the emissions generated by your own production, and Scope 3 is actually the emissions generated by the use of the hydrocarbon, by the oil and gas or petrol and diesel that is being produced. And although the attention tends to be usually on the majors, it's interesting to see that most of the emissions come from the national oil company and from the independent company. And so I thought that having a look at how they're doing and what they're communicating in terms of their action. And so if you look at the major, you can see, especially in the European major, that net zero and the energy transition is on the first page of most of the companies. And it is becoming a serious and strong commitment and objective. And it started with Repsol, to be fair to the first one, and then many others. BP recently, with the new CEO, Bernard Looney, declared a net zero by 2050 target, and Shell follows suit, upgrading their already existing objective to net zero as well by 2050. So the oil and gas industry, the major, are not only diversifying into the renewable, they're also, of course, keeping their production of oil and gas, but make sure that that goes to a net zero, both in Scope 1 emission, but also in Scope 3 emission. So that would be an interesting path to follow, because that means a big change. When it comes to the independent, the situation is a bit different. Again, this was before the crisis, and now in a fight for survival, most of them. But independents are mainly powered or financed by private equity, which means that return on investment is the key message on the web pages, and finding something about climate change is a bit harder. That said, we need to remember that you don't go to these companies as a consumer, where you go to the major as a consumer. So their communication is mainly targeted, even on the website, to their investors. And finally, when you look at the national oil company, still predominantly is about energy security for the country, or wellness for their citizens. So is about exporting the maximum of your resources if you are a country lucky to have them, and make sure that your societies can be fueled by that and brought to a higher level of comfort. So that's pretty much the situation. What does it mean for the oil and gas industry in the UK, and in particular for the UK continental shelf? So it could be a threat, but it could be an opportunity. And let me explain why I think this could be an opportunity, why we think here at GTC this would be an opportunity. So far, the oil and gas industry and the other sector, the renewable, have been kind of operating in isolation with little communication until recently. But there is a clear opportunity here to leverage and to build on the strength of the UK oil and gas industry, to accelerate the path to transition, and to help the industry itself transition to a new normal, to a new net zero. What you see there is the value for the economy, the current value for the economy in 2020 of the various sector. And the UK oil and gas industry is about 24 billion compared to a 2 billion from the renewable, and a zero, or a placeholder, if you want, for the hydrogen and the carbon capture, which of course requires some intervention on the normative side as well. So the opportunity is there with an integration to transition this industry to a new normal, where oil and gas and renewables and hydrogen and carbon capture are not separate silos, but are part of an integrated industry operating in the North Sea, which has a net benefit, which is potentially doubling the value for the economy, and at the same time achieving net zero by building up on the carbon capture and hydrogen production. And that is important, but the UK is only one country, so this is a global problem. The atmosphere, as I said before, doesn't know boundaries. So how are we doing globally? Well, not so well. Again, you can see most of the countries there being in the insufficient or highly insufficient. You can see Morocco being okay, Paris compatible because it's mainly investing in solar, but nobody's a role model. And so that's a challenge. It's a global challenge and needs to be acted globally, but acting globally is very, very difficult, and we see now difficulties even for a small consortium or cartel, if you want, like the OPEC recently, you know. And so how we are doing this? This is where COP26 in Glasgow becomes important, because that's the final step so far, or the next step of a journey that started in the 90s and has hit pinnacle so far in Paris in 2015, where the agreement to commit to a 2 degrees or stay below the 2 degrees was signed. So the COP, which is the conference of the party, is actually a conference. It's a place where governments, officials, their scientific advisor, the business community, the non-profit organization, the non-governmental organization come together to discuss and set targets and set policies to tackle climate change. And they're informed by the IPCC report, as you can see below. So COP26, Glasgow, November, you know, is, in the words of the previous president, is the UK one shot for success in climate change. And the success of UK tackling climate change has important consequences, because it is the country where we see it started, and it is the country that can set the example and export a lot of that technology. So it's valuable also for the supply chain. Now we see that you know, COP26 has moved to spring 2021 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But you know, to quote the words of the chief of the International Energy Agency, when this crisis passes, the world economy will bounce back, but emission must not. And that's where we're working on. And that's, I think, that North Sea vision of an integrated energy built on the strength of the oil and gas industry and its people can make a difference and can make a strong contribution. So that ends my presentation. Just a slide with a bit of a source here. I didn't make that data, but they're all here if you want to look at them more in detail and explore them. I know it was kind of a fast-paced run through. And if you're interested in learning something more, here my suggested reading or some of the online training, which can keep us busy during this lockdown period, and I would strongly recommend them. And with that, Stephen, I'm over to you.
Thank you, Luca. That was almost 20 minutes on the nose. So you've obviously been practicing that one. Well done. Really good presentation. There's a couple of questions already coming in. Now, to all our participants, now's the time to ask those questions and put your hand up and really get the dialogue going. Tremendous amount of detail. I'm sure there's a few things you want to pick apart. Let's start this morning by talking to James Lawson. James, would you like to ask your question, or would you like me to ask it for you? Just put your hand up if you want to ask the question. Okay, I'll ask the question for James. So morning, Luca. Are the top 20 companies contributing to climate change, including the Scope 3 emissions in the table that you showed?
The top 20 company, you mean the top 20 companies responsible for the 2034?
Yeah.
Well, if you mean they're contributing to climate change as contributing to the problem, the answer is yes. But of course, as I said before and showed that with that graph, it is yes, because we are using that product and we are demanding that product. In terms of are they contributing to the solution or are they committing to the solution, it's not a uniform picture. But as I said, most of the major are really seriously turning the ship towards that direction. So we've seen BP declaring a net zero target, including Scope 3 emission just before the pandemic. We see Shell last week or the week before doing the same, or actually before that, Total as well, ENI. It's really interesting to go through those websites and also talking to the people. You know, the website have changed since a couple of years ago when this was mentioned more of a kind of sustainability tick in the box sometimes. This is now becoming really at the center of the strategy. And that is also because finance is changing, you know, and finance is starting to put the criteria for contribution to the climate change as one of the elements for financial decision, and that hopefully will impact also the small and independent company in a positive way by helping them to focus on that challenge as well.
Okay, super. I have Can Yang's put a hand up, so I'm going to allow Can to talk. Can, over to you if you want to ask your question. We're having problems with the mute button. Okay, we'll try and fix that. In the meantime, I'll move on to another question. Here's one from Jane Grant. Obvious question: where does COVID-19 recovery put us now on the climate emergency progress?
That's the key question, right? And so, Stephen, we had a few conversations about that in recent times. So, is that an opportunity? Don't like to use that word for something which is, so dramatic. But will it? Let's put it that way: will the COVID-19 accelerate the transition, or will it put it back? That's the key question, which is now being debated. There are good arguments in both camps, and a lot depends on government strategy and government decision. From what I've seen, I hear in the UK, I tend to be on a kind of a 65-70%. It will accelerate the transition, and the 30% might not. The challenge is, of course, a recovery of the economy that put so many jobs at risk, and is putting many, many more jobs at risk in the times to come in the oil and gas industry. And so, how can we accelerate that transition, but make sure it is a just transition? Right? So the concept of a just transition was a key concept that developed in COP15 in Paris, which is you need to transition in a way that doesn't really impact dramatically the communities which live on the current energy system. And so that's the kind of balance to be found. We've seen oil price going down. That makes it, of course, cheaper, which is more competitive with renewables. But is that a long term? Is that a short term result? A lot depends on how we come out of the COVID pandemic. I tend to be the optimist that we will come up from an economic perspective, but that recovery will also be a decarbonized recovery, or there is an opportunity there to accelerate that transition. That's what I hope for.
Okay, super. Just a quick request, Luca, can you flip back the presentation to the resources page so that folk can see the various resources that you put on there? That's grand. Here's a question from Davy Quinteri. Thanks for the great presentation, Luca. Question: COVID-19 has forced society to adapt, and as a result, Scope 3 emissions have significantly dropped. While it won't inevitably bounce back, could there be an opportunity to make some of these reductions stick? If so, what would be the main levers, in your opinion?
That's a very good one. And are we going back to the previous normal? That would be a missed opportunity. We are all now, a lot of us, those who can, are working from home. And actually, I have been busy since I was before. I'm just not traveling physically, and I'm joining a number of conversation and discussion in this virtual way. And I think we're all getting used to it. And actually, in some cases, it is even a better medium to have some type of conversation. So I'm not looking forward to going back to travel as I used to. I like to do some of that, but minimizing it would be a good thing for the planet, in addition of a good thing for the use of my time, and that's for many other people. So will we stick to do more and more of these meetings, conversation, even these conferences or webinars in virtually rather than in person, which has a potential positive impact? We will travel less to work because we do work more remotely. I hope so. I hope there will be a reduction in the demand. That will put a reduction in the demand. Of course, shutting down factories and work, that's not a good thing, because we are somehow going through it, but it's not a long-term sustainable thing. And I think, to quote in the words of the United Nations chief, we're not going to fight climate change with a virus. So we need to go back to an economy, but we should go back to a more sustainable economy. And some of the behaviors might stick. I think we also learn that we can do it. We also learn that by changing collectively and almost globally, we can have an impact on the emissions. And so I hope that is the kind of key conversation that will be part of COP26 next year, and that government will start putting together with policy, but also that the companies individually will start considering different models of work that are less requiring on people traveling and using fossil fuel for that.
Okay, super, thank you. Looks like we've solved our problem with the mute button. So guys, if you want to ask your question directly, please put your hand up and I'll try and allow you to talk. I'm going to pick on someone though. Elaine Maslin, you've asked quite a long question. So I wonder if you can hear me now, if I'm going to allow you to talk, and I wonder if you want to ask the question directly to Luca. Oh, she says she hates asking questions. That's fair enough. No, no worries, Elaine. I'll come back to your question in a second. Right, so let's pick on a few more people. Lots of people now putting their hands up. So let's see who we can find. If you could start again, put your hand up, we'll try again. In the meantime, let's ask a question from Dave Wavell to all panelists. The efforts made by the European energy company is encouraging, but from what I've seen, US-based companies don't seem to be making similar efforts, which is alarming. Considering they are critically inefficient, is this truly a global effort? And if not, what do you think we can do to make this a global effort?
It's a good point. Actually, some of these European companies are actually global in their footprint and presence. But it's true that we see that more in Europe than in the US, and that's reflected in the politics as well and in the policies in general. Some of the international majors based in the US are more looking at the human side, the human energy, etc. So they're kind of coming that way. But probably don't want to upset some of their investors at the moment. I think again, finance will play a key role in that, but so does the public opinion. And I think that Europe is ahead in driving that fight against the climate change, both from a behavior, from a cultural perspective. So I like to be optimistic. I think they will follow, and I think. Yeah, that's what will happen. But it's true that at the moment they're lagging behind the European companies.
Okay, super. We're going to go to Dave Russell now for him to ask a question. Dave, you're on.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Thanks, Luca, for a very thought-provoking presentation. And Stephen, I do think this is a great arrangement you guys at the OGTC have put up to allow these things to be debated. My question to Luca is really quite a simple one, and it's coming from a guy who can remember coal in the UK becoming unfashionable and cheaper, overseas markets becoming available. And my question is, in the current low oil price environment, do you think the UK's position on CCUS specifically might change?
The position on the CCUS from the UK, was stated, I think, in November 2018 with a big conference in Edinburgh. And it is that CCUS is not an option. It has to be part of the solution, and there's no way around it. And so since then, it's been part of the political manifesto and part of the agenda, and even including into the Committee on Climate Change report. So I'm not so sure it relates so much to the price or how they relate to the oil price, to be honest, because a lot of the focus on CCUS now in the UK is about decarbonizing industry, and therefore how to retain high value, but also high energy intensity and polluting industries like steel, petrochemical, cement, etc. in the UK, but without contributing to climate change. And the answer is CCUS. The thing that has been impacted by the COVID emergency is a bit of the timing. Right? So we were expecting a recommendation by BEIS on the framework, on the commercial framework for CCUS, because I saw another question as well in the chat about that. At the moment, why would you take CO2 and transport it and store it? Do you make money out of it? No, you don't. So either it is a mandatory thing for someone who is producing a lot of that, or there needs to be a market. And usually things tend to work better when there is a market with incentive, of course. Also, government is looking at that either from a contract for difference or regulated asset-based options for the capture and separating that from the transport and sequestration. But that framework is not there yet. And what the industry needs, the oil and gas company that can do that, because they got the skills and the technology to do that, what they need some certainty in how the economics work so that they can make some business case and get financing for those projects. We have projects already. So the Acorn project, which is led by Pebble Dot with Shell and many others out of St. Fergus, is planning to have the first molecule of CO2 injected offshore by 2023 and is still on track for that at the moment. What the impact of the COVID on the economics of the oil companies involved willingness, that's yet to be seen. We will have to look at that. But it's going there. We were expecting a white energy paper from the government. It was supposed to come out in March. That has been now postponed and is being looked at from a COVID-19 impact perspective as well. So, but we're looking forward to that. And similarly, the CCC was expected to publish their report and recommendation for the 6th carbon budget, which is the new pledge that governments have to do part of the COP process. And that was expected in September to be presented and inform the government policy to be presented in November at COP26. And that again has been also postponed to later in the year. So there is a kind of a 6-8 month pause in all the process, but it was going in the right direction, and I think it's still going in the right direction. It's back to the question I think Davi asked before, which is, let's take this opportunity, this time to reflect and adjust. Not only on the impact of COVID, but also how can we direct the recovery towards a net zero solution where CCUS needs to be part of it, because that's in all modeling so far, it has to be part of it.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I'm going to come to Alison now. Alison, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, hi Luca. Thanks for a really interesting, thought-provoking presentation. I'm interested to know what you'd like to see from the oil and gas industry before COP26. So we have, that's been delayed, so we have additional time. So how can we make best use of that additional time to prepare?
Good question. Planning, there's nothing like planning when you cannot do much. A lot of the work in the oil and gas industry can be done. A lot of the engineering excellence we have in the UK and in the northeast of Scotland in particular, can be put at work in finding solutions. So the oil and gas industry has two main challenges, right? And that's part of our Net Zero Solution Center at the OGTC. So the program is, the challenges are, one, how do I keep producing a feedstock, a material, gas, which is important for a number of things, but especially will be more and more important to produce hydrogen from blue hydrogen, which means from methane, but with associated carbon capture and storage. And the other challenge is also how can I keep producing the feedstock for a number of materials that are part of our daily life, which needs to be to go through from rethinking and to be much more reusable and recyclable, because we don't want the plastic to go in the ocean, but we need some of that for a number of things, even for the energy transition, because we need materials for lightweight vehicles, the PPE for hospitals that I mentioned before. There's plenty of examples of things that are part of our daily life that cannot be replaced, or replacing them would probably make a bigger impact on the greenhouse gas emissions. So we still need some of that oil and gas. Now, what we don't need is, of course, the emissions for producing it. At the moment, the UKCS is producing about 15 megaton of CO2 equivalent per year. And that's just by producing. And that is mainly from power generation offshore, and flaring and venting. And power generation, gas turbines or diesel to power up the platforms tends to be the 60-70% of the emission. So we need to think, how can we decarbonize that? And that, a lot of that to me has to do with the integration with renewables. So can we create a kind of an offshore grid? Can we electrify the platform while we still need to produce that? Or can we use a hydrogen? So what I would like to see from the oil and gas industry is to put all that thinking power, that engineering power in thinking, okay, how do we come out of this in a cleaner way? Decarbonizing Scope 1 emission first here in the North Sea, because that's what we can do. It is with our power.
Okay, great. Look, I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Richard Scott. Richard's with Princeton Masons. So, look at a great presentation. Question: what 3 actions in people's everyday lives will be needed to be taken in order to keep as close to the Paris targets as possible?
What 3 actions?
Yeah, what would you recommend that everyday people do in their everyday life to try and hit the 1.5 target?
From an individual perspective, the levers we have are mainly on the heating, and therefore put a jumper on and reduce or put a smart controller. Don't heat your house when you don't need it, and don't heat to a point that you actually don't need it. Because I would say, domestic heat is a big contributor to the UK emissions. So that's the first one. Second is, I think when you travel, do you have to travel? Can you, of course, it's different now in context, but when we come out of this, do you have to travel? Can you do a video conference instead? And if you travel, can you start thinking in terms of sustainability and move away from the mindset of the bigger the car, the bigger the engine, the better, and start a mindset of sustainability. Think hybrid, think electric, or think taking public transport or bicycle and reducing. Those are, I think, the 2 main areas we can do in our individual life. The third action I would like to think to see is education, and people spreading and getting that new mindset around within our community, within our friends and family, because everybody has an opportunity to influence. And for those who can, also, of course, with government and within our companies. And so how can we influence our companies to think greener and to reduce the carbon footprint, both Scope 1 and Scope 3, and think more sustainably?
Super. I've got a good question from Elo O. How is it that oil and gas majors are committed to combating climate change if big oil only spends 1% of its combined budget on renewable energy schemes? That's in 2018. And continues to lobby governments around the world, amount to over 125 million US in 2019, including lobbying against climate change policies. So, yeah, are the companies actually putting their money where their mouth is, Luca?
I think we are seeing a big change in that. And as I said before, it's not one size fits all. It's not everybody. That's I think we need to build on the pioneering one, or the one that are going towards that direction seriously, and set an example. You're right. There's a lot of different things going on. The investment is an interesting one. It's true. Until recently, and probably still now, technically, it is still more profitable to invest in oil and gas than it is to invest in renewables when you look at the profit. Now, let's not consider the oil price of the last week or two, even the negative oil price, because that's a kind of a spike. But if you go before that, you're still more profitable in the short and mid-term. The question becomes then an element of long-term sustainability, because government are thinking of carbon taxes, finance is starting requiring investors, we are investors, we are starting requiring some green credential for the funds of the investment of the company we invest with, and that is turning the economics, which again is what drives a change in addition to public sentiment. So it is a patchy picture, and you're right. There are still activities of climate change deniers going on, which is surprised me, but they're still happening. There are people who think that the Earth is flat as well, which surprised me even more. But that's true. But I see that shift coming. It takes time, because it takes time, but it's accelerating. It was accelerating until recently, at least, and that's what encourages me.
Okay. Right. Q&A is done now. We still a whole bunch of questions. Unfortunately, we haven't had time to go through them all. I do apologize to everyone. But we are going to be experimenting with our networking now. So if you'd like to leave the presentation to go about your business, that's fine. Have a great day.
If I can ask, maybe there's an opportunity to keep the conversation through LinkedIn as well, because we publish something, and we'll keep an eye on that, and I'd be happy to keep the engagement also from you, because I see many people here in the list of participants that know a lot of this stuff much more than I do, and so I'd like to have that conversation becoming ongoing on our LinkedIn page.
Exactly. So what I would suggest is those who want to actually continue the conversation can stay on for the networking. We'll remove the presentation from the screen, and we'll open up the cameras so that you can actually see everyone and have a chat. So thank you very much for participating in today's Tech20 Virtual. Have a great Friday, a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.